It only took 5 seconds, just 5 careless seconds, for a bully to make the biggest mistake of his life. Imagine walking into a diner, thinking you're about to humiliate some quiet, ordinary guy, and suddenly, everything goes wrong. Chocolate milkshake splashes over his head, and what you expect next isn't a fight. It's something far more terrifying: calm, controlled, precise. This wasn't just a man having lunch. This was a retired Navy SEAL, trained to stay calm under fire, trained to survive situations you can't even imagine. And that one moment, that one milkshake, would turn a careless bully's day into a life-changing lesson. Stick around, because you won't believe what happens next when disrespect meets discipline. It only took 5 seconds, 5 careless seconds, for one bully to make the biggest mistake of his life. The diner was loud that afternoon, plates clinking, people chatting, blenders roaring behind the counter. The smell of fries and fresh coffee filled the air. Waitresses hurried between tables balancing trays, and a group of teenagers laughed loudly near the jukebox. In the corner booth sat a quiet man in a plain gray hoodie and jeans. He looked ordinary, calm, relaxed, the kind of guy you wouldn't notice twice. That man was Daniel Mercer. His posture was straight, but not stiff. His movements were simple, controlled. Even the way he sipped his coffee seemed measured. If you paid close attention, you might notice faint scars along his hands, or the way his eyes casually scanned the room, not nervously, but habitually. No one in the diner knew that Daniel was a recently retired Navy SEAL. Years of intense training, combat missions overseas, long nights in dangerous territories where one wrong move could cost lives. He had learned to control fear, to stay calm under pressure, to read people before they even spoke. Today, though, he wasn't a soldier. He was just a man trying to enjoy a quiet lunch. Across the diner stood Travis, tall, broad-shouldered, and loud enough to make sure everyone noticed him. He fed off attention, laughter, reactions, and when he didn't get it, he created it. He had a habit of targeting people who seemed quiet. To him, silence meant weakness. Calm meant easy entertainment. When he spotted Daniel sitting alone, something about the calmness irritated him. "Hey, hoodie," Travis shouted, holding a large chocolate milkshake high in the air. A few of his friends snickered. "You look a little too comfortable over there." Daniel slowly lifted his eyes. He didn't glare. He didn't react. He simply looked at Travis, calm and steady. That silence, it hit Travis harder than any insult. People were watching now, and Travis couldn't back down. He smirked, walked over with exaggerated confidence, and stood right beside Daniel's booth. "You deaf or just shy?" he mocked. Still nothing. And then it happened. In one sudden motion, Travis tilted the milkshake cup and dumped the entire thing over Daniel's head. The thick chocolate liquid splashed down, dripping from his hair onto his shoulders, soaking into his hoodie, sliding onto the table and pooling beside his untouched plate of food. The diner went silent. Even the blender behind the counter seemed to stop. Chocolate dripped slowly onto the floor. A fork clattered somewhere in the distance. Everyone expected shouting, anger, maybe even a fight. Some people reached for their phones, ready to record what they assumed would be chaos. But Daniel just closed his eyes. He inhaled slowly. One deep breath in, one controlled breath out. His jaw tightened slightly, not in rage, but in restraint. He reached up calmly, wiped the milkshake from his eyes, and blinked away the dripping chocolate. No sudden movement, no explosion, just control. And in that quiet, heavy silence, something shifted. Travis's grin began to fade, because in Daniel's eyes, there wasn't embarrassment. There wasn't fear. There was something much worse. Focus. And that's when Travis realized he may have just poured a milkshake on the wrong man. "You gonna cry about it?" Travis laughed loudly. A few nervous chuckles came from his friends, but most of the diner stayed silent. Something in the air had changed. The energy wasn't playful anymore. It was tense. Still, Daniel didn't react the way most people would. No shouting, no insults, no wild movements. Instead, he stood up slowly, calm, controlled. His chair slid back gently across the floor. He didn't rush. He didn't flinch. His movements were steady, precise, like someone trained to never panic, no matter what was happening around him. Chocolate milkshake continued dripping from his hoodie onto the tiles below. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a napkin, and carefully wiped his face. He cleaned his eyes first, then his forehead, then his hands. Every motion deliberate. It wasn't just patience. It was discipline. Then he folded the napkin once neatly. Only after that did he speak. "You have 5 seconds to walk away." His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was calm, flat, certain. There was something about the way he said it. Not a threat, not a challenge, just a fact. Like he was stating the time. 5 seconds. Travis laughed again, but this time it wasn't as confident. It came out slightly forced. "Or what?" he said, trying to keep control of the situation. Daniel didn't answer. He simply looked at him. And that look, it was different. His eyes sharpened, focused, cold, not filled with rage, but calculation. Like a switch had flipped inside him. Like he had assessed the room, the distance, the angles, the exits, all in a heartbeat. The waitress near the counter leaned toward another customer and whispered, "That guy, he doesn't look scared." Because he wasn't. You see, Navy SEALs are trained in one powerful skill above all: control. Control over fear. Control over anger. Control over pain. Control over situations when everything around them falls apart. Daniel had spent years in environments where panic meant death, where emotional reactions could cost lives. He had learned to breathe through chaos, to think when others froze, to stay steady when bullets flew. A milkshake. That wasn't intimidating. Public embarrassment. That wasn't new pressure. But disrespect, intentional disrespect, that was something else entirely. And more importantly, Travis didn't understand the difference between someone who is quiet and someone who is dangerous. The diner remained silent. No one dared interrupt. Daniel's 5 seconds were almost up. You could almost count them in the air. 5, 4, 3. Travis stepped closer. He smirked again, trying to regain dominance, and reached out to shove Daniel's shoulder. That was his second mistake, because Daniel hadn't been standing there frozen. He had been waiting. Before anyone could blink, Daniel moved. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some wild movie-style fight scene. It was fast, controlled, efficient. The moment Travis's hand touched his shoulder, Daniel reacted, not with anger, but with precision. He shifted slightly to the side, redirected the shove, and in one smooth motion grabbed Travis's wrist. A subtle twist, a calculated step forward, and suddenly Travis found himself bent forward, his arm locked, his chest pressed firmly against the edge of the diner table. The entire diner gasped. Glasses rattled. Someone dropped a spoon. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. It happened so quickly that most people didn't even understand what they had just seen. 1 second Travis was standing tall. The next, he was pinned. Travis tried to yank his arm back, but the more he pulled, the tighter the hold felt. Daniel wasn't straining. He wasn't gritting his teeth. His breathing remained steady. He wasn't even using full strength. Just enough. Enough to control. Enough to make a point. "You don't want this," Daniel said quietly. His voice was low, calm, almost patient, like a teacher correcting a student. Travis winced as pressure increased slightly on his wrist. "You're hurting me," he shouted, panic creeping into his voice. The loud, confident bully from moments ago was gone. In his place stood someone confused, overpowered, embarrassed. Daniel leaned closer, just enough so Travis could hear him clearly over his own heavy breathing. "Imagine what I could do if I wasn't holding back." There was no anger in his tone, no yelling, just truth. And somehow, that made it even more intimidating. A bead of sweat rolled down Travis's forehead. His friends, who had been laughing earlier, now stood frozen. None of them stepped forward. None of them knew what to do, because they could see it now. This wasn't a random guy. This wasn't luck. This was training. Years of it. After a few long seconds, seconds that felt like minutes, Daniel slowly released the pressure. He stepped back immediately, creating space instead of escalating the situation. Control. Always control. Travis stumbled backward, grabbing his wrist, staring at Daniel in disbelief. His face was red, not from pain alone, but from humiliation. The entire diner had just witnessed a shift in power. He opened his mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. His confidence had evaporated. "Next time," Daniel said calmly, adjusting his soaked hoodie. "Choose kindness. It's safer. Not louder, not harsher, just wiser." Then, as if the moment hadn't just shaken the entire room, Daniel pulled his chair out and sat back down. He picked up his fork, straightened his plate, and continued his meal. Like nothing had happened. The diner remained silent for a full 10 seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. It was the kind of silence that follows something unforgettable. And then, from somewhere near the counter, a quiet voice finally broke through the tension. "Who is that guy?" An older man sitting near the counter stood up slowly. He had been quiet the entire time, watching carefully. His posture was straight despite his age, and there was something knowing in his eyes. "I know who he is," he said. All eyes turned toward him. Even Travis looked up, still holding his wrist. The older man nodded toward Daniel. He served 3 tours overseas. Special operations. Navy SEAL. A ripple moved through the diner. He saved lives, the man continued. Risked his own more times than we'll ever understand. The room grew even quieter than before. The information settled heavily over everyone. The quiet guy in the hoodie wasn't just some random customer. He was someone who had walked through danger most people only see in movies. Someone who had trained for years in discipline, sacrifice, and protection. Travis's face went pale. The embarrassment he felt before, it doubled, then tripled, because now he understood. Daniel hadn't reacted out of fear. He had reacted out of restraint. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. He didn't look proud. He didn't look triumphant. If anything, he looked like he wished the spotlight would disappear. "I didn't come here for trouble," Daniel said softly. "I just wanted lunch." There was no bitterness in his voice, just honesty. The waitress hurried over with a clean towel and a gray hoodie from the diner's lost and found box. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaky. "This shouldn't have happened." Daniel gave her a small, reassuring smile. "Not your fault." He accepted the towel and began wiping the last of the dried milkshake from his neck. Calm, unbothered, controlled. Meanwhile, Travis stood frozen in the middle of the diner. The reality was sinking in deeper with every second. He hadn't just bullied some random quiet guy. He had disrespected a man who had likely endured freezing nights, enemy territory, and situations far more intense than anything inside this diner. A man who had protected strangers like him. Slowly, and this time without swagger, Travis walked back over to Daniel's table. Each step felt heavier than the last. The diner watched in silence. I didn't know," Travis muttered, avoiding eye contact. It wasn't loud. It wasn't confident. It was small. Daniel looked up at him calmly. "You shouldn't need to know someone's background to treat them with respect." The words were simple, but they landed like a weight. No aggression, no lecture, just truth. And somehow, that sentence hit harder than any wrist lock ever could. Travis swallowed hard. For the first time that day, he wasn't thinking about looking strong. He was thinking about who he had been, and who he didn't want to be anymore. Travis's voice was barely above a whisper when he spoke. I'm sorry," he said. Not loudly, not dramatically, not to impress anyone, but sincerely. The sincerity hit differently this time. There was no bravado, no smirk, no fake laughter to cover embarrassment, just the quiet acknowledgement of a mistake. And here's the part most people didn't expect. Daniel nodded. He accepted it. No revenge, no shouting, no gloating, no public humiliation, just calm, measured acceptance. Because real strength isn't about overpowering someone in the moment. It's not about winning a fight, making someone fear you, or proving dominance. Real strength is restraint. It's knowing you can act in a way that would hurt someone, and choosing not to. As Daniel returned to his meal, the diner slowly began to breathe again. The tension melted away, replaced by awe. Conversations resumed, but softer this time. People glanced at each other with a subtle new awareness. The energy in the room had shifted. Respect had been earned in a way that didn't need shouting, clapping, or recognition. Before leaving, Daniel paused by Travis's table. He looked him in the eyes, calm but firm, and said, "You're strong, But strength without discipline is dangerous. Learn control. Those words weren't just for Travis. They were for everyone who had been watching. A reminder that power without wisdom is risky, and that true control is invisible, silent, and deliberate. Then Daniel walked out of the diner. He didn't wait for applause. He didn't need to explain himself. He left behind more than just a lesson in physical strength. He left behind an example, a living proof that being quiet doesn't mean weak, that calm doesn't mean scared, and that the measure of a person is not in how loud they are, but in how steady they remain when provoked. Travis sat frozen in his seat, replaying every second. The embarrassment, the fear, the humility. It was a lot to take in, but the lesson sank in, deeper than any punishment could have delivered. Everyone watching that day left changed, even if just a little. 5 seconds of bullying had been enough to reveal character. 5 seconds had turned a reckless moment into a lifetime lesson. Respect isn't optional. It's earned. It's given. It's demanded by integrity, not fear. Because one day, you might pour a milkshake on the wrong person, and in that moment, you might just discover that real strength isn't measured by your ability to intimidate, but by someone else's ability to stay calm, composed, and wise. And that lesson, it's unforgettable. If you thought that story was intense, remember this. Strength isn't about fighting. It's about control, respect, and restraint. If you enjoyed this story, smash that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that teach powerful lessons in just a few minutes. Hit the bell so you never miss a story like this, because the next life lesson could be one click away.